Amidst a deafening silence, where the weight of unspoken words echoed through the cold walls of a seemingly ordinary house, a story marked by a succession of intense emotions and unexpected twists began. Imagine yourself sitting in a corner of a room lit by soft moonlight, where each shadow reveals a piece of the truth, and each whisper of the wind carries a bitter memory. This is the scene where our story begins. Amidst an atmosphere charged with drama and suffering, but also with a courage that, even in the face of the greatest humiliations, refuses to hide. It was a night like so many others, where the anticipation in the air mixed with the palpable tension of a heart about to be broken. The family environment, which would normally be a haven of affection and unity, had become a stage for betrayal, disrespect, and pain. In this context, the protagonist, a woman marked by her own internal conflicts and invisible scars, began to suspect that something was terribly wrong. A restlessness that, although silent, cried out for attention. Every gesture, every word whispered amidst the trivial conversation of his family, began to reveal cracks in the facade of a relationship that had once been so promising and full of hope. The scene, full of happy memories and moments that once radiated happiness, had become a minefield of shattered illusions and broken promises. The imposing presence of that family, now involuntary accomplices to the pain, amplified the feeling of betrayal that was taking root more and more in the protagonist's chest. She felt, in every fiber of her being, that justice and truth were being denied, that the overcoming, so desired, seemed like a distant dream. The environment was filled with an oppressive silence, punctuated only by the irregular sound of restrained breathing and the accelerated beating of a betrayed heart, as their eyes met without the necessary empathy, and the feeling of revenge began to emerge silently. The protagonist found herself lost between the conviction that something profoundly wrong had occurred and the paralyzing fear of facing reality. The initial suspicion, as furtive as the wind blowing outside, had gradually transformed into a bitter certainty. She was facing a betrayal that could no longer be ignored. Each gesture and each word revealed a cruel truth, a revelation that imposed itself inescapably, generating a whirlwind of emotions that were confused between the desire to free herself from that invisible prison and the impotence in the face of a situation that was unfolding with such force that it seemed destined to change everything. At that very moment, as the protagonist watched, with a blank stare and a broken heart, the scene that she would later describe as the height of her humiliation, something inside her was ignited. She saw his family gathered together, as if in a silent council of compassion that would never extend to protecting her. And in the eyes of those who should have shown solidarity, she found only judgment and condescension. Grief was mixed with a feeling of revolt that threatened to break down all barriers, as if the injustice she had experienced were the spark capable of inciting an irreversible inner transformation. And it was in this scenario of pain and uncertainty that, faced with helplessness and disbelief, the internal struggle began to take shape. That feeling of helplessness was the trigger for the awakening of a dormant force, the need to fight back against the system that had left her vulnerable. Behind her teary eyes and dejected expression, a decision was being formed, filled with courage and determination to transform the humiliation into an act of personal justice. Every detail of that moment, however insignificant it might seem at first glance, became part of a puzzle that would reveal, over time, a story of overcoming and transformation. While the atmosphere remained saturated with tension, the protagonist experienced a whirlwind of feelings that led her, on the one hand, to feel deep regret, and, on the other, to understand that perhaps this was the turning point needed to change the course of her life. The internal conflict, as intense as the silence that dominated the room, made it clear that the once precious bonds were now irretrievably broken. The initial suspicion, which began as a mere whisper, had transformed into an internal storm, causing every fiber of her being to cry out for answers and a redefinition of her own identity. Everything seemed to conspire so that at that very moment, the truth would pour out like a mighty river, taking with it the illusions and fears that had imprisoned her for so long. In that moment of almost total emotional abandonment, The protagonist felt the weight of loneliness and the vital need to be heard and understood. To find, even if only for a brief moment, an echo that would resonate her own truth. And so, in a silent and emotionally charged cry, she prepared to make the decision that would change not only her destiny, but also the way those around her would see the reality of human feelings. And you, who are following every word of this story, how would you react if you found yourself facing such a devastating situation? Leave your comment, like and subscribe to the channel, so that together we can continue this story that promises to reveal the secrets behind every tear and every seemingly simple gesture, but which, deep down, reflect the rawest truth of the human heart.
Hello, my name is Isadora, and this is the story of the greatest pain and the greatest strength I have ever felt in my life. To this day, I wonder how I got to that point. But the truth is that we never realize when we're going down a hole. We only feel it when we're already at the bottom. And the scariest thing is that when I realized it, I was already completely alone. Alone, humiliated, and surrounded by people who called themselves my family, but who never lifted a finger to protect me, much less him. Yes, him, the man I loved. The man I gave up everything for. The man who, in front of his own family, stood idly by as I was exposed, attacked, and shamed, without even trying to defend myself. But I am not here to play the victim. I'm here to tell you everything from the beginning, because no one can imagine what happened after that night. Nobody expected me to have courage, but I did. And what I did was enough for him to regret, bitterly. When I met Matthews, I was a different person. You know, that light-hearted, dreamy woman who believes in love above all else. That was me. He appeared at a somewhat turbulent time in my life, but he came as a breath of calm. You know, those people who seem to have a special glow, who know exactly what to say, how to act, and who make you feel like the only person in the world. Yeah, he was that guy, at least in the beginning. Matthews enchanted me with words, with gestures, with affection, and I, hungry for attention and care, gave myself over, donated myself, molded myself into what he needed. I started going to his house, getting to know his family, and at first, it seemed like everything was perfect. His mother was a little cold, but polite. His father was more reserved. His sisters were a little distant, but I let it go because he was with me, and that was enough. Or I thought that was enough. Over time, I began to notice small signs, veiled insinuations, comments with double meanings, a judgmental look here, a joke there, and Matthews always pretending he didn't see. Or worse, sometimes he laughed along. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that I was too sensitive, that I was overreacting. But the final straw came one Sunday, a family lunch. It was his mother's birthday. The house was full. Laughter, voices, dishes being served, wine being poured. I helped prepare everything. I was complimented by his uncle for making a dessert. And then, suddenly, as if by a flash, his mother made a comment that I will never forget. Yeah, at least it's good for something, right? Like that. Cold. Sharp. In front of everyone. I froze. My eyes went straight to Matthews, waiting, begging for him to say something. But he just smiled, lowered his head, pretended he didn't hear. The people around me were embarrassed. Some laughed nervously, and me, I wanted to disappear. It was as if my dignity had been ripped away right there, in that room, amidst the smell of roast chicken and forced laughter. And the worst part, nobody did anything. Not a word in my defense. Not a hey. That was awesome. Nothing. When I returned home that night, something inside me had changed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I just shut up. But it was not the silence of someone who accepts. It was the silence of someone who decides. In the following days, Matthews acted as if nothing had happened. He sent me messages, asked if everything was okay, and made dinner plans. And I would answer dryly, not because I wanted to play games, but because, honestly, I no longer knew who he was. I spent days reliving that scene, every detail. His sister's muffled laughter, the spoon that fell on the floor and no one picked it up, the way he looked small in front of his mother. And I thought, if he doesn't defend me from his own family, who else wouldn't he defend me from? If he doesn't assert himself, doesn't take a stand, doesn't have courage, then he will never protect me from anything. It was then that I realized the problem wasn't just him. It was me. I who accepted crumbs. I accepted being in a place where I was clearly not welcome. I lowered my head for fear of losing someone who, deep down, was never mine. The wound of humiliation still bled, but something deeper began to grow, indignation. And with it came the desire to show that I was not weak, that I didn't need him, that I could fight back my way. That's when I started planning. Not a plan for revenge like in a soap opera, but a plan for liberation. Because I knew that if I continued there, in that unequal relationship, I would lose myself completely. And for him to feel what I felt, I needed to be strategic, keep following. Because in the next part, I'll tell you exactly what I did. How I turned the tables down, how he began begging for a chance he never really deserved. The idea of retaliating was not born out of hate, nor out of anger, born out of pain. From a pain so great that it turned into strength, from a silence so suffocating that it turned into a scream, even if it was an internal scream, mine alone. I didn't want revenge in the classic sense of the word. I wanted liberation. I wanted to make him feel, even if only for a second, the bitter taste of being ignored, diminished, discarded. What I planned didn't involve scandal. I'm not that type. What I wanted was for him to discover, in the most unexpected and painful way possible, what it was like to be replaced. And the most ironic thing of all, I didn't even have to lie. The truth hurt enough. That week after lunch at his family's house, I pulled away. I didn't block. I didn't break up. I just walked away. I responded less. I took longer. I didn't accept the invitations. And Matthews, of course, started to find it strange. On the third day, he showed up at my work with a chocolate and a silly smile on his face, trying to break the ice. But I wasn't there to smile back. I received it, thanked him, and returned to my desk. No hug, no kiss, no explanation. He noticed, and his first reaction was humor. As always, "You're PMSING, aren't you?" he said, with that little laugh that made me nauseous when I wasn't in the mood. But this time, instead of swallowing the joke, I replied, "No, Matthews, I'm waking up." His face fell. He tried to make conversation, asked if everything was okay, if he had done something wrong. And I just said, "If you don't know, then you weren't paying attention." I walked away. I went back to work, and he left. But that same day, at night, he called me. He insisted. He sent audios. He wanted to understand. I didn't answer, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel obligated to give an explanation. And that's when he started to lose control of the situation, because he was used to Isadora, who always explained everything, who apologized even when she was the one who felt hurt, who didn't know how to leave a room without first trying to fix it. But that Isadora had died the day he lowered his eyes while I was humiliated. At the end of that week, I was invited by a coworker to happy hour. I hesitated. I wasn't much of a go-getter, but something inside me said, go. And I went. I put on clothes I hadn't worn in a long time, put on perfume, and looked at myself in the mirror strangely. I hadn't recognized myself in a long time, but that night, I saw myself again. In that bar, between loose conversations and light laughter, a young man started talking to me, Eduardo, educated, charismatic, attentive. He didn't start a conversation with flirting. He just asked me what I did, what I liked. He listened to me, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt seen, not judged, not measured, just seen. I spoke little. I laughed more. When he asked for my number, I hesitated, not because I still felt something for Mathois, but because I still felt something for myself. And deep down, I didn't want to embark on anything until I felt whole again. But I gave the number. No pressure, no expectations. The next day, Mathois showed up again, this time at my house, with flowers, with that memorized speech of a man who knows he made a mistake, but doesn't know exactly where he went wrong. You're acting weird, he said. You've changed. You look different. And I replied, thank God. He wanted to talk. He asked to come in. I left. We sat on the couch. He said he loved me, that he wanted to understand what was happening. And I asked, do you remember what your mother said on Sunday? He looked down. Silence. Do you remember what you did? More silence. Then he tried to justify it. He said he didn't want to create conflict in front of the family, that he thought it was better to let it go, that he didn't imagine I had felt so bad. And that's when I exploded. You didn't realize why you don't pay attention to me. You think love is physical presence, but love is positioning. Love is choice. Love is attitude. He tried to argue, to say he didn't mean any harm. And I firmly said, you may not have meant to hurt me, but your omission hurt more than any offense. He was quiet, and I continued. Mathois, I'm tired of explaining myself. I'm tired of begging for respect. And you know what's worse? I'm tired of diminishing myself to fit into your life. His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't cry. For the first time, I was the strong one in the scene. He said he loved me, that he wanted to fix it. And I said, sometimes love isn't enough. And now, I need to choose myself. He left without really understanding what had happened. And the next day, Eduardo sent me a message, a simple, it was nice meeting you yesterday. And I smiled, because it wasn't about him. It was about me. In the following days, Mathois became a desperate ghost. He texted me every day. I called. I tried to arrange meetings. He said he was going to change, that I was the love of his life. But you know when you feel like it's too late. I read each message with a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness that he didn't realize it sooner, and relief that I finally learned to listen to myself. One day, he sent me an audio message crying. He said he missed me, and I cried too. But I didn't answer, because sometimes absence is the only answer that makes someone truly reflect. And it was in the silence that he began to realize the damage, not only in the relationship, but in himself. And I started to live. I started going out more, laughing more. I went back to therapy. I started dancing again, wearing what I liked. Listen to me without fear. It wasn't easy. I had relapses. I had days of longing, of doubt, of wanting to go back. But I resisted, because I knew that if I went back, I would be betraying the one person I never wanted to let go of, myself. Life has these ironies. We spend months trying to understand why someone treats us badly, begging for crumbs of attention. And when we walk away and choose ourselves, that's when they wake up. Matthews was waking up. Too late. He started sending me messages practically every day. Some were short, others were long, full of words that, months ago, I would have begged to hear. But now, they didn't touch me the same way anymore. They played, yes, but in a different way, because they stirred the memory of who I was and how I let myself be erased. In one of the audios he sent, I remember a phrase that left me standing there for minutes staring into space. I understand that I failed you, Isa, but I swear that now I know what I lost. It was the first time he said that. I know what I lost. And it hurt. Because yes, I believed he was being sincere. But delayed sincerity rebuilds nothing. It only highlights what could have been avoided. That same week, something unexpected happened. His mother texted me. Yes, the same one who humiliated me. The same one who laughed at my pain. She wrote a huge text apologizing, saying that she had been unfair to me, that she regretted her words at lunch, that she had spoken on impulse. I read, really? And I left it unanswered, not out of pride, but because that didn't fit me anymore. I didn't want revenge or retribution. I just wanted distance. I wanted peace. And the peace I needed didn't come with reconciliation. It came with silence. It was then that I understood. My pain had bothered me. They were moving, not out of true empathy, but because they were feeling my absence, because I stopped begging. And that, for them, was an imbalance. And as any imbalance is frightening, attempts to restore things began. But I wasn't the same anymore. I no longer needed to be accepted. I needed to be respected. In the meantime, Eduardo continued to be a light presence. He didn't insist. He didn't invade. He sent me good morning messages, shared music with me, asked how I was doing, and really listened to me. I told him, little by little, about what I was going through. He never judged. He never pressured. He just was there. And that's exactly what won me over. The lightness, the listening, the space. A rare thing after everything I've been through. There was a night when he invited me to dinner. A simple, beautiful place with background music that made me want to close my eyes and take a deep breath. I was nervous, and he could tell. And it was direct. If you're not ready, we can just talk. No rush, no pressure. There. In that moment, I realized that it wasn't about being ready for someone else. It was about being ready for me. And somehow, I was, because for the first time, I felt respected in all my limits. That night, we kissed. It was simple, natural, no promises, no crazy plans, just a moment of truth. I returned home with a light heart, but also with a weight. How would I tell Matthews this? Because even though there was nothing official with him anymore, I knew he was still trying. And in a way, I wanted to end it as honestly as possible. For the first time, I wanted to put an end to it and not just disappear. The next morning, I met him at a cafe. He arrived with that haggard look, like he hadn't slept properly for days. When he saw me, he smiled with relief, and I knew that meeting would be a turning point. The conversation started with him saying he was in therapy, who understood a lot about his own behavior, that I had been reading books about relationships, listening to podcasts, who wanted a new chance. I took a deep breath and went straight to the point. Matthews, I believe you are trying. Really. But the time I waited for this has already passed. He looked down. Are you with someone? He asked, almost in a whisper, and I replied, I'm meeting someone who treats me like a priority. like I deserve. The silence was long. I saw his eyes fill up, but he didn't cry. He just nodded. You're right. I just wish I had realized it sooner. I wanted it to, but I didn't say that. I just got up, wished myself strength, and left. And it was there, on that walk alone to the car, that I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Not because I was with someone else, but because I had managed to break out of a cycle that was bad for me. I had had courage. I had said no. He had chosen me. That same night, I called my best friend, Camila. She has always been my foundation. He laughed with me. He cried with me. He held me in my worst moments. And when I told her everything, she just said, "You have no idea how proud I am of you." And that made me cry, because I myself hadn't realized the woman I was becoming. Over the next few weeks, things settled down. Mathoys disappeared from the networks. His mother too. No drama. No explosion. Just silence. And that was all I needed. With Eduardo, things went smoothly. No pressure. No strings attached. Just two adults with difficult histories trying to build something new with respect. I learned that there is no easy starting over, but there is a clean start. And that's all. It had been more than a month since that coffee with Mathoys. I thought that conversation had ended everything. I really thought he would understand. But he didn't understand. Or, if he understood, he didn't accept it. At first, he disappeared. He disappeared from everything. No message, no hi, no signal. I didn't know if it was pride, anger, or if he was actually respecting what I asked. Part of me hoped it was this, respect. But the other part knew that this was just the calm before another movement. And it was, because out of nowhere, out of absolute nowhere, on a Sunday morning, he appeared at the door of my house. He slammed his hand because I didn't answer the intercom. I was in the back, doing laundry, trying to live a normal life. When I went to see, it was him, with a backpack on his back and a lost look. I froze. I didn't know whether to open it, ignore it, or call someone. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. "Hi," he said, his voice low. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I needed to see you." I stood there, saying nothing. "I don't want to bother you." He continued, I'm leaving. I'm going to be away for a while, and I needed to tell you this while looking you in the eye." My stomach turned. Was he leaving? Like this? I'm going to my uncle's house in the countryside. I'm going to be away from the city for a while, away from everything. I need to rebuild myself. And then, for the first time, he really cried. No theater, no memorized speech. He cried. And I'm not made of iron. I got emotional too. I messed up, Isa. I know that. But I needed to thank you, because if you hadn't left me, I would never have seen myself. I remained silent. He took a deep breath and continued. "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I just wanted to tell you this, and leave it up to you." He opened his backpack and took out an envelope. It's a letter. I wrote it with everything I never managed to tell you properly. Read it if you want, or throw it away. But it's yours. I took the envelope, speechless, and he turned around. He left without another word. It just went. I closed the door with a shaking hand. I sat on the couch. I stared at the envelope for several minutes until, slowly, I opened it. The letter was 4 pages long. It was handwritten, in his handwriting, a little crooked, as usual. And there, I read everything he never had the courage to say to me out loud. Things from childhood, from the violent father, from the controlling mother. How he grew up learning that love was obedience, that affection was a reward for good behavior. How he repeated, without realizing it, the same patterns that hurt him, and in the middle of it all, me. He said that I was the first woman who looked at him with sweetness, who listened to him, and that, out of fear of not deserving it, he pushed me away. He tested me, he sabotaged me, until I get lost. I cried, reading it. I cried because I understood that he was human, and because I saw there a hurt boy trying to heal himself. But I also cried because I realized that for a long time, I thought I could save him, and I couldn't. His pain was not my responsibility, and I paid dearly for forgetting that. I kept the letter in a little box. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't reread it either. I left it there, as a memory that deserves rest. That week, I dreamed about him 3 nights in a row. It wasn't a romantic dream. It was a dream of closure. I dreamed that I saw him boarding a train, and I stayed at the station in peace. On the last night, before the train left, he said to me, "Thank you for waking me up." I woke up with a wet face, but with a light heart. With Eduardo, things were going well. No rush, no labels, but with presence. And one Saturday afternoon, he invited me to go on a different kind of outing, a trail. I almost said no, my lazy side screamed, but I went. And it was magical. Nature washed me, the green, the silence of the trees, the sound of the river, everything reminded me that the world went on, that the pain would pass, that we are reborn, even with scars. At the end of the trail, we sat on a tall rock. The sun was setting slowly, and I looked at him. Eduardo was not perfect, but it was present, and that, for me, was everything. "You look different today," he said. Light, more loose. I smiled, maybe because I'm allowing myself to be happy, without guilt. He hugged me, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to love again. That night, lying in my bed, I thought about everything I had experienced. I thought about Isadora, who one day cried hidden in the bathroom because she didn't know if she was good enough, in which she dressed to please, in which I silently listened to insults disguised as jokes. And I thought about the woman I was now, who said no without fear, that was chosen, who knew that good loved doesn't hurt. Matthews never got in touch again. I found out, months later, from a cousin of his, that he was still living abroad. He said he was changing, studying, trying to be better. And me, I wished he could, because rooting for someone to be cured doesn't mean wanting them back. It just means that we overcame it. The wounds still exist. Sometimes when someone speaks in a harsh tone to me, they hurt. But now, I know how to take care. I know how to set limits. I know who I am. And most importantly, I know that I no longer deserve to live. I thought it was all over. That after the letter, the silence and the absence, the cycle with Matthews, had finally ended. But life, sometimes, insists on testing our peace. And when his mom texted me again, I felt this test coming on strong. It was a normal Wednesday. I had just gotten off work, still in my hospital uniform, tired, wondering what I was going to have for dinner. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and saw the notification on WhatsApp. Mrs. Vera. Yes, I still had her number saved. By habit, perhaps. By habit of someone who one day thought he would be part of that family. The message was simple. Isadora, can we talk? It's important. My heart raced. I hadn't responded to her messages since that lunch. That embarrassing episode. That wound, although healed, still throbbed at times. I stared at the screen for a few minutes. I took a deep breath, and I decided not to respond right away. I went home, took a long shower, had dinner alone, and thought about what to do. The next morning, I responded with a short, "Can it be right here?" She accepted. The conversation started out strange, formal, almost artificial. She said she was looking for me because she had dreamed about me 3 nights in a row. She stressed, "In every dream, you were crying. And when I woke up, I felt such guilt," she wrote. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if it was emotional manipulation, if it was sincere, if it was just another attempt to redeem himself after seeing his own son falling apart. She continued. He said that Mathois had changed, that he had gone through difficult times, away from home, that he had finally moved away from his father's shadow. And one of the first things he confessed when he started talking to her again was that his biggest mistake was allowing her to push me away. I read that with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Maybe because of a trace of sadness, maybe because of tiredness. She told me, "I know I was cruel. I know you felt alone. And I never apologized to you looking you in the eye. I wanted to see you." The word "see" kept echoing in my head. I wanted to see you. See what for? To apologize. To ease the guilt. To try to mend ties that I myself had already buried. I was silent for hours. And again, I didn't respond right away. I talked to Camila, my best friend, as I always did in situations that left me emotionally confused. She told me, "You don't owe her anything. But if it means you can free yourself once and for all and end this in peace, maybe it's worth listening." That's why, 2 days later, I agreed to meet Donna Vera in a discreet cafe, far from everything, on a rainy Friday. She arrived punctually, her hair tied up, a scarf around her neck, a tired expression. When he saw me, he smiled. But it wasn't a victorious smile. It was a sad smile, embarrassed. He sat down in front of me, and before I could even say anything, he began, "You must not listen to me. I owe you, but I appreciate you coming." I remained silent. She took a deep breath. I grew up in a family where a woman who talked too much was considered insolent, where a mother-in-law had the right to protect her son from everything, even from his own choice of love. I wronged you, Isadora. I humiliated you, and I did it to show power, to put you in the place that, deep down, I thought you should occupy. And today, I see that it was my place that was completely out of place. She started to cry. Not that dramatic crying, but a contained cry of someone who no longer knows where to keep their shame. I felt threatened by you, because you were everything I never was, free. You spoke your mind. You loved fiercely. You didn't bow down. And that scared me because I was raised to fear women like you. I confess that at that moment, a part of me wanted to get up and leave because it was too hard to hear those words. It's hard to remember that because of her insecurity. I was hurt so deeply, but something inside me also felt that this was real, that she was there. Finally, without masks, she held out an envelope. Yes, another envelope. But this time, inside, there was a photo. It was the birthday. That one. The day of the lunch when it all happened. In the photo, I was standing to the side, serving someone's plate. And in the background, she, with her eyes fixed on me, she said, "That picture haunts me. Because I see the woman you were, and I wonder how I could reject someone who only wanted to love my son." I kept the photo in my bag, not yet knowing what I would do with it. The conversation went on for almost an hour. She asked me for forgiveness. She said that if she could go back in time, she would have done everything differently. And me, I said something I didn't even know I would say. I forgive you, but I'm not coming back. She understood. She lowered her eyes, and before getting up, he said, "You were the best thing that ever happened to my son, and that's why he had to lose you, to understand what it means to truly love." I left that cafe in silence. I didn't cry, don't smile. I just walked slowly to the car, like someone who needed to feel the weight of their own body again. When I got home, I took the picture out of my bag. I looked at her for long minutes, and I realized that that woman there, in the image, still existed, but now stronger. I called Camila. I told everything. She was in shock, but in the end, he said a phrase that left its mark. "You have closed the cycle. Now, just move on." And that's what I tried to do. I returned to my routine, to the lightness of my days with Eduardo, to the small joys of a simple life. But deep down, I knew something inside me had changed again. Maybe because, upon hearing the request for forgiveness from the woman who hurt me the most, I understood that no one is immune to transformation, not even those who hurt us. And this, as paradoxical as it may seem, is also part of the cure. It was supposed to be just a normal day, a quick trip to the market to buy fruit, and some basic things for dinner. My mind was in 1,000 places, replying to Camilla's text message on my phone with one hand and trying to hold the reusable bag with the other. I didn't even pay attention to the person coming in the opposite direction. I only realized when I heard my name in a surprised and muffled tone. Isadora. The voice froze me. Time seemed to freeze right there, between the pasta aisle and the seasoning section. I looked up slowly, my heart pounding in my throat. It was him. Mathoy's, thin, longer hair, unshaven, wearing a worn-out t-shirt that I recognized from a trip we took together years ago. His gaze was different. There was something tired, but at the same time, serene. He smiled, hesitantly, almost guiltily, and I stood there, in silence, trying to digest that encounter. For a second, I thought about pretending it wasn't me, but I couldn't. It was too late to go back. He took a step toward me, unsure if he could hug me. I didn't stop him, but I didn't get any closer either. We stayed there, in that confusing zone between two worlds that were once one. "I didn't know you still lived around here," he said. "I still do, but I'm a different person now," I replied, trying to smile. He understood. I think he did, and he suggested a coffee. I hesitated, but I accepted because I needed to know. I needed to understand if he had really changed, or if he was just another polished version of the same man. We went to a nearby cafe. We sat down. I ordered a tea. He ordered a black coffee. "Are you okay?" he asked with that careful way of someone who knows that one false move could blow everything up. "I am. Working hard, at peace," I replied. He nodded, staring into the cup. "I saw my mother the other day. She told me you two met." I nodded. I asked her to do this. I told her that before any attempt at redemption, she needed to look you in the eyes. He looked at me, and at that moment I realized there was sincerity there. "She told me about the photo, about what she said to you." "Yes," I said, "and it was hard, but necessary." He took a deep breath. "Isa, there are so many things I wanted to tell you, but I don't think any of them are more important than this. Thank you." I frowned, confused. "Thank you," I repeated. "Yes, because if you hadn't left me, I would never have found myself. And I needed to lose myself completely to understand that what I called love was, in fact, control, fear, ego, not love." Those words caught me off guard. He wasn't. They're begging for me. to come back, or trying to justify it. He was, by all indications, at peace with the end. I've been to therapy almost every day these past few months. I've confronted traumas, fears, and repetitive behaviors, and I have come to understand that you tried. You tried really hard, and that I only learned after I lost you. I was moved, not for him, but for me, because hearing that from that man was like validating everything I felt, everything I'd lived in silence. You know, he continued for a long time. I thought getting over you was just a matter of time, but I've come to understand that it wasn't about getting over you. It was about getting over the man I was when I was with you. That hit me like a punch in the chest. It wasn't pain anymore. It was recognition. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I said, I also needed to rebuild myself. You destroyed me into pieces I didn't even know existed. But I put it all back together, and I made something new. For me, he nodded with tears in his eyes. Are you with someone? He asked, trying to sound casual. Yes, I answered. His name is Eduardo. He's gentle, respectful. He never makes me doubt my worth. Matthews smiled sadly. I'm happy for you. Really? You deserve a calm love, Isa. Not the chaos I brought. We drank the rest of our drinks in silence, and when we stood up, he gently grabbed my arm and said, Can I give you a goodbye hug? I agreed, and he hugged me like someone letting go, like someone who understands there's no going back. And when he pulled away, he said softly, Loving you is what taught me to love myself, even if it was late. I left there with a huge weight on my shoulders. That reunion didn't bring pain. It brought relief. I needed to see with my own eyes that he had changed, not to get back together, but to end things with dignity. That night, I told Eduardo everything, without hiding anything. He listened to me in silence, then took my hand and said, I'm not afraid of your past. All I care about is what you build with me. I cried again, with gratitude, with peace, because now, finally, it was the end of the story that hurt me and the beginning of the story I chose to live. I know that not everyone has the chance to end a cycle face to face. Sometimes life doesn't allow it. Sometimes the person doesn't change. But in my case, life gave me this gift to see clearly that my choice to leave saved not only me, but perhaps him too. And that, for me, was the true happy ending. After that meeting with Matthews, everything seemed to have finally found its right place. I no longer felt anger, hurt, or that need to understand what could have been. I finally felt that I could move forward with ease, with the real feeling that the past had closed. But life, as it is, always leaves one last door ajar. And that door was my own forgiveness. Even with all the conversations, reunions, and compromises, there was something I couldn't resolve inside myself. Something that bothered me every time silence fell or when I lay alone in my room. I realized that there was still a shadow, a low voice deep down saying, You allowed too much. Isadora. That was what hurt the most. Knowing that I had put myself in that place for so long, that I had accepted too little from someone who claimed to love me. It wasn't about Matthews anymore. It was about me, about what I had tolerated in the name of a love that, deep down, was never healthy. It was on a Friday night, while Eduardo was sleeping next to me after a simple dinner at home, that I realized I needed to face this. I got up slowly, without waking him, went to the balcony and sat on the cold floor with a blanket over my shoulders. I looked up at the sky and started writing a letter. But this time, it wasn't to him. It was to myself. In that letter, I wrote everything I wished I had heard. I wrote as if I were an older version of Isadora talking to that girl who agreed to be silenced in front of his family, who cried in the bathroom, muffling the sound, who made excuses for her friends, who dressed up hoping that new clothes would solve the emptiness. I wrote and cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. I cried with anger, with shame, but also with relief. I wrote until my fingers ached and my tears ran dry. At the end, I signed it. With love from the woman you have become. I kept the letter inside my diary, and for the first time since then, I felt like I was whole. In the days that followed, my mood changed. I felt lighter, more alert, more myself. Eduardo noticed. He always noticed. And one Sunday morning, while we were having breakfast together, he looked at me with that calm that was only his and said, "Can I ask you something, Isa?" I nodded, stirring the coffee. "Do you think you've forgiven yourself for going through all that?" The question took me by surprise, and I remained silent, because deep down, he knew. He knew that this was my blind spot. I stared at the cup for a few seconds and answered, "I'm trying, but it's hard not to blame myself." He held my hand across the table. "But it's not your fault that you loved, Isa. It's never the fault of the heart that gave too much. It's the fault of the one who didn't know how to take care of it." Those words came to me like a breeze after a hot day. And at that moment, I knew I was on the right path. But there was still one last thing missing. I needed to allow myself to live this new phase without ties, without fear, without that constant need to protect myself. And so it was that, a few weeks later, in a conversation with Camila on the phone, she asked me if I had already thrown away all of Mathuy's souvenirs. I said yes, but hesitated, because the truth is that that first letter from him, I still had it, and the photo too, both kept in a box at the back of the closet. After the connection, I went to my room. I took out the box. I looked at the things inside and realized that I no longer felt any attachment. There was no more pain, only history. Part of me, but no longer alive in me. I took everything, put it in an envelope, and left. I went to a park near my house where there was a small lake. I sat in front of the water and stayed there for about 20 minutes, watching the movement of the trees and the ducks that swam carefree. I took the envelope, tore it into small pieces, and threw it into the water slowly, carefully, as if each piece carried by the current was also carrying an old part of me. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just took a deep breath and said softly, "Thank you. Now you can go." I returned home with a lightness I didn't even know was possible. And at night, I wrote another letter. Short, simple, this time to the future. In it, I said that I hoped that the Isadora of tomorrow would never again forget how much she was worth, that she would never again lower her head for fear of losing someone, and that she would never, ever again confuse pain with love. Days passed, and life went on. With Eduardo, everything flowed naturally. He didn't demand anything from me in a hurry, nor did he demand titles. But that Saturday afternoon, as I was walking with him through the city center, he stopped in front of a flower stand and handed me a small bouquet of sunflowers to remind me that the sun is always there, even when we turn our backs on it, he said. And I smiled, because he didn't need to make grand gestures to show me how much he saw me. That night, we had dinner on the porch. We made a playlist together, danced barefoot, and I felt like it was there. It was with him. It was with me. It was with life that I was being reborn. Before going to bed, I opened my phone and, on impulse, went through my old photos. I saw images from the past of Isadora smiling at family parties where she felt invisible. of Isadora holding back tears next to people who didn't respect her. And then I saw the recent photos of me, of Eduardo, of Camila, of my work, of my house. And I saw that the smile was the same, but the look was different. Now, it was a whole look. And that's why, today, when someone asks me if I would go back, if I would have done something differently, I calmly answer, no. Because everything I've experienced, even the things that destroyed me, have taught me. And today, I know that I deserve the love that I give. I know that my voice matters. I know that what I tolerated back then will never have space here again. I never imagined that I would reach the end of this story with the serenity that I feel now. For years, I carried within me a confusing mix of hurts, doubts, regrets, and guilt that consumed me silently. I wondered if I would ever be able to free myself from this burden, if I would be able to love again without fear, without reservations, without that constant fear of being destroyed again. It was on this journey that I learned what forgiveness really means, not the simple act of forgetting, but the profound exercise of liberation from myself and from those who, even unintentionally, hurt me. After that unexpected encounter with Mathoys at the market, when our eyes met and the past seemed to come back like a ghost, I began to feel the anger that had been consuming me slowly disappear. Seeing that man I loved so much and who, at the same time, had hurt me, made me realize that he was also human, full of imperfections, limitations, and fears. He was not a villain, and I was not a helpless victim either. We were two lost souls, two souls trying to survive within a relationship that was never healthy. Understanding this was liberating and, at the same time, painful. Because understanding the wounds we carry requires looking within without running away, without protecting ourselves behind fragile defenses. It was a slow process, full of ups and downs. There were days when the longing seemed overwhelming, nights when loneliness suffocated me, and moments when anger completely blinded me. But I gradually learned that I didn't have to carry all that alone. Talking to Camila, to Eduardo, and allowing myself to feel without shame or fear were the first steps towards rebuilding my shattered world. And above all, I understood that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness or forgetting what happened. It is a choice of love, a conscious decision to release the chains that bind us to the past so that we can move forward. Months after our last contact, I received an unexpected visit. Donna Vera, Mathoy's mother, knocked on my door. With tears in her eyes and a choked voice, she asked for forgiveness, not only for what I had experienced, but for the role she had played in the pain that haunted us. It was an intense and revealing moment, which showed me that people can change, that forgiveness is possible even when the wounds seem impossible to heal. I accepted the request not out of obligation, but because I realized that holding a grudge only perpetuates the suffering and prevents me from living fully. Forgiveness became an act of healing for me. This final chapter taught me that the end of a relationship doesn't have to be a bitter and definitive full stop. It can be a comma, a new beginning, a new chance at life. With Eduardo, I learned to experience love in a different, healthy, and true way. He welcomed me with patience, respect, and tenderness, showing me that a relationship can be a source of support, growth, and happiness, not pain and insecurity. Today, when I look back, I see that everything I experienced, the tears, the letters, the reunions, the silences, and the hugs were essential to making me the strong, whole, and happy woman I am now. The pain was transformed into learning, the fear into courage, the loneliness into self-knowledge. I learned that I deserve respect, that my voice matters, and that self-love is the basis of all genuine happiness. For those of you who are reading this story, I want to leave a message of hope. No matter how difficult the path may be, it is possible to free yourself from the chains of the past. Saying enough is an act of courage and self-love. Happiness does not lie in depending on others, but in recognizing yourself as complete and worthy of love and respect. Thank you for following me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, share it with anyone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real and transformative stories. And you, are you ready to close your own cycles and allow yourself to be happy?